Celebrating 44 years on the air, Farm Week is a production of Mississippi State University Extension.
Today on Farm Week, 2 USMCA presidents have a lot to talk about, and they're optimistic. In Southern Gardening, a rare double feature on the edible and the beautiful. In the markets, Zach says prices are moving, and he's on the prowl for why. And finally, an encore feature, the Flora Brothers of Maben, Mississippi, partners in life and business. Farm Week starts right now.
Hello everybody, I'm Mike Russell. Thanks for joining us today on Farm Week. Farm, labor, and trade, two consistent areas of focus, especially over the last 4 years, and even more so now with a new administration in the White House. The president met recently with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and continued his tour of USMCA countries last week in a virtual meeting with Mexico. Here with more on that meeting is Farm Week's Jonah Holland. Jonah?
Mike, the USMCA, a modern-day update for Nafta, was signed in late 2018 and took effect in July of last year during the height of the pandemic. Needless to say, the virus impacted trade with Mexico, though recovery in late 2020 was noticeable. Nevertheless, the U.S. and Mexico had plenty to catch up on as America's new president assessed the relationship.
Days ago, the President of the United States and Mexico met online to discuss a long list of issues still simmering between the countries: trade, the coronavirus pandemic, immigration, and national security.
The United States and Mexico are stronger when we stand together. There's a long and complicated history between our nations that haven't always been perfect neighbors with one another, but we have seen over and over again the power and the purpose when we cooperate, and we're safer when we work together, whether it's addressing the challenges of our shared border or getting this pandemic under control.
That shared border was a focal point of the Trump administration. During its tenure, it replaced roughly 600 miles of fencing along the nearly 2,000-mile border. U.S. demand for farm labor has risen over the last 20 years. 500,000 foreign-born workers still harvest American fields and milk American cows. Up to half of those workers are from Mexico. Maintaining an inexpensive seasonal ag labor workforce has challenged previous administrations. The Biden White House has signaled a collaborative stance towards the country's third largest trading partner. Mexican President Obrador welcomes what appears to be a lowering of the political temperature.
En estos tiempos,
I believe that our proximity will allow us to develop better in these times, to integrate ourselves as has been done with the treaty, for North America to complement itself, to integrate itself economically and commercially. It will make us stronger.
According to the government figures, the U.S. has a large trade surplus with Mexico, $112 billion at the end of 2020. Perhaps even more important, the rush of people into the U.S. across America's southern border may impact the availability of farm labor here. That, of course, may require an even further revamp of the H-2A guest worker program. Mike?
Thanks, Jonah. And that revamp he spoke of, if it were to happen, would come in addition to changes already made in the H-2A program. Just before Joe Biden became president, the Department of Labor announced a final rule to streamline the H-2A application process and strengthen protections for workers. The so-called American Rescue Plan, likely to be signed into law this week, doesn't contain money for Iowa farmers devastated by that derecho storm last August. That provision was stripped out of the bill by House Democrats before it was passed in the House last week.
The Washington Post says the storm, which slammed the Corn Belt with straight-line winds gusting to 140 miles an hour and cutting a path hundreds of miles long, was the most costly thunderstorm disaster in U.S. history, at $7.5 billion damage, even more than any American tornado. The USDA says 850,000 crop acres were lost in the derecho. 6 million acres of corn and soybeans were affected, about 20% of the state's total farmland. In a press release, Iowa Senator Charles Grassley called out lawmakers for stripping the language out of the bill, saying, quote, apparently some believe Iowa's natural disasters aren't good enough to get the same assistance previously made available for California wildfires or coastal hurricanes.
On the lighter side, a Southern gardening double feature today. Let's start with spring color, and there's probably no better way to do that than with the always popular Columbine, a unique flower that the U.S. Forest Service has bloomed in Asia and crossed over the Bering Land Bridge thousands of years ago. Here's Gary.
Columbine are one of my favorite spring plants with their interesting flowers and make the perfect addition to any garden and landscape.
Columbine are fascinating plants. The foliage is reminiscent of maidenhair fern, but the flowers are the main attraction. The flowers are suspended on thin, wiry stems and either turn up or nod down. A notable feature of the Columbine flower are the spurs attached to each of the 5 petals. These spurs resemble an eagle's claw, for which the Latin translation is aquila, which is related to the Columbine genus name Aquilegia. These spurs are thrust backward and create a counterbalance that allow the flowers to nod and bob with the slightest breeze as if floating on water. These Swan Series Columbine flowers are an interesting landscape addition. The yellow is bright and cheery, but I like the bicolors of red and white, blue and white, and pink and yellow. Though these plants look fragile, they are really tolerant of many environments. Planted in full or partial shade, Columbine will thrive and flower profusely. This plant likes good loamy to gravelly soil, and a rock garden is a favorite. In North Mississippi, they are perennial, while in the coastal counties, Columbine should be used as spring annual color.
Not only do Columbine add beauty and interest to the landscape, they also attract wildlife. The colorful spurs are filled with sweet nectar and are magnets for hummingbirds and butterflies. I'm horticulturist Gary Bachman for Southern Gardening.
Now for part 2 of our double feature, and we go from beautiful to edible. A plant growing in more backyards than we can count, the garden tomato. A lot of folks start them with cuttings from other plants, but you can start them from seed. Here's Gary to show you how.
Like many home gardeners, I like to grow my own tomatoes from seed for the coming season. It's really an easy process. So let me share my latest tips on growing your own tomatoes at home. In the past, I've demonstrated using core pellets and cell trays to start tomato seeds. Lately, I've been trying to save tray space by sowing seeds densely and be able to start more varieties at a time in a smaller space. Let me show you how. Of course, we need good commercial container mix. You could use germination or seed starting mix, but I like using this general purpose container mix. And you'll need cell packs, pots, and seeds. In the past, if I wanted to sow 6 different tomato varieties, I would sow 1 or 2 seeds per cell in 6 cell packs. These packs would take up this amount of space. Now I use a single 6 cell pack for all 6 varieties. I sow multiple seeds of a variety in each cell and be sure to add a label. I'll cover and place on my germination rack under LED lights. After germination, I let the group of seedlings grow until they form true leaves. Removing the plug, I'll gently tease the seedlings apart and transplant these seedlings into 3-inch cups using the same container mix. After about 3 weeks, these will be ready to transplant into my earth boxes. Starting tomatoes like this works great, and it works for peppers too. I'm horticulturist Gary Bachman, and I'll see you next time on Southern Gardening.
We'll take a break right here, but stick around. Coming up in our Farm Week feature, we take another look back at the logging industry. It's a story we first aired in 2016. Jason and Jeremy Flora from Maben, Mississippi, brothers in life and business, the 2016 Outstanding Loggers of the Year. How did they get started, and how did their way of doing business result in a big win? The answer coming up on Farm Week. Don't go away.
At Mississippi State University, Extension is reaching beyond the college campus and impacting adult education. We're instructing agricultural professionals on the latest trends in research and technology, inspiring communities, empowering small businesses, and promoting the growth of healthy families where youth and adults can reach their fullest potential.
The MSU Extension Service, sharing our vision for the future.
ATVs are a ton of fun for people of all ages, but these powerful machines can also be a ton of trouble if safety guidelines aren't followed. Never carry more than one person on a single ride or four-wheeler. The four-wheeler can become unstable and very dangerous. ATVs are designed for off-road use only. Never drive one on a highway or any other paved surface. And always ride the right size machine at the right speed. This message brought to you by MSU Extension 4-H.
It's a simple idea. Knowledge that transforms lives shouldn't be limited to those on a campus, but extended to any and all who want or need it, wherever they are. At Mississippi State University, we've been making that possible for more than 100 years through the MSU Extension Service. What began as an effort to extend the latest research to farmers has become something much more. Today, we're helping Mississippians from all walks of life, giving them the tools they need to build a brighter future. We're sparking the imagination of students around the state and inspiring the next generation of doctors. We're helping rural communities find their way to the internet and connect to the world at large. And we're teaching families how to lead healthier lives in ways both big and small. MSU is standing firm in its commitment to that one simple idea: extend the knowledge that transforms lives, wherever they are.
Time now for the market report. Zach Ashmore in studio with his usual deeper look. And the WASDE report just in.
Thanks, Mike. We'll get to the WASDE report in just a minute. But first, market's taking a small downturn last week, but not by much. This time of year, people are looking to the future, and speculation on what's to come leads the numbers. Let's take a look. Last week's biggest loss, lumber finally seeing prices fall for the first time since mid-January. Looks like supply is finally catching up. Last week's biggest gain, soybeans, a gain of 29 cents. As you can see, corn and wheat down. So what's the deal? I sat down with Extension row crop economist Will Maples to find out. So Will, grain crops have seen a spike in prices recently, but just last week both corn and wheat are down while soybeans keep rising. What's causing this, and how long will it last?
So those price movements we saw last week with corn and wheat being down, I think were just more of a short-term effect to some things we saw in the market happening last week. Long-term, I don't see that really sticking. If we look at the markets right now, how they are, U.S. exports, grain exports are still really strong. We have historically high sales to China still. And on the soybean side is even kind of a better outlook with exports due to kind of the slow start of Brazil's export season. Brazil has a lot of kind of complicated weather issues going on right now, with northern Brazil being very wet. That's really kind of slowing down their ability to get soybeans harvested. So overall, the export picture looks very strong. That's going to really even out any kind of price drops we saw last week going forward. The only thing we need to really kind of keep an eye on as far as this old crop's concerned is if we start getting too high of a prices, that could internationally make our beans and corn a little bit more expensive and turn focus more towards South America as far as exports are concerned.
As you saw, soybeans up and going. No word on when it'll stop. Maybe this week, maybe next. But this isn't without reason. China's buying, Brazil's harvest up in the air, and U.S. acres unknown. Market analyst Sean Hackett fills in the details.
When you're dealing with 120, 130 million bushel carryout, every little tiny adjustment either way makes the market go up 50 cents. So very, very hard from one day to the next to know which way the market's going to. Oh, the weather's a little bad. Now the weather's actually good. Demand was a little disappointing, you know. So we just think we're stuck in a very volatile sideways trade into the springtime on soybeans. We don't expect this pattern to really change until we get further in and see what kind of acres we actually get planted here in the U.S. A drought, of course, would help, but the way our natural climate cycle algorithm is projecting, we're seeing a drought and a hot, dry pattern mostly into July with August backing off. That means corn could get in a lot of trouble with yield, but soybeans could get bailed out. You know, soybeans could rally on the worry, but we think the actual crop problem could be in the corn market. So we think the corn market could drag the soybean market up, not the other way around this time. We already know South America is going to be probably not top end. We don't know how far below top end, but it's not going to be the bin buster crop we had last year. So everybody wants a big U.S. crop. If it looks like that crop's going to make it, then they'll back away and saying all is well. But if it looks like we're going to come up short, as we believe we are, then they're going to pedal to the metal again and really, remember last year exports picked up in August when they realized our crop was going to come up short. That could be another month for a trigger for them to come back and buying aggressively again.
This month's WASDE report just dropped. Not many changes from last month, but that appears to be normal this time of year, at least according to Will Maples. Let's jump in.
U.S. wheat mostly unchanged, white wheat exports raised, hard red winter exports lowered, season average farm price unchanged at $5 per bushel. Global wheat outlook is for larger supplies, increased consumption, higher exports, and reduced stocks. Global production increased, mainly on higher Australia production. U.S. corn supply and use outlook unchanged from last month. Projected season average farm price is unchanged at $4.30 per bushel. Global outlook is for larger production, increased trade, and greater ending stocks relative to last month. U.S. rice projection unchanged from last month. Projected prices for both long grain and other states' medium and short grain are both raised this month to $12.40 and $12.80 per hundredweight. Global outlook is for slightly larger supplies, higher consumption, nearly unchanged trade, and reduced stocks. U.S. soybean supply and use projections for 20 and 21 are mostly unchanged this month. Ending stocks remain at 120 million bushels, down 405 million from last year's record. Global soybean supply and demand forecasts include higher production, exports, and ending stocks. Argentina's production reduced 0.5 million tons due to dry weather conditions over the past month. 2021 forecast for total red meat and poultry production lowered from last month. Fed cattle prices unchanged from last month. Milk production forecast lowered slightly from last month. Annual cheese price forecast unchanged from last month as well. U.S. cotton forecasts show lower production, consumption, and ending stocks relative to last month. Projected marketing year average price up 1 cent from last month. World cotton supply and demand estimates show lower production and ending stocks compared with last month, but higher mill use and trade. World ending stocks forecast 1.1 million bales lower than last month at 94.6 million bales.
And that's it for a deeper look into the markets. Mike?
Time for another look back into the Farm Week archives. This time to 2016, a pair of brothers chosen as that year's Outstanding Loggers of the Year. Jason and Jeremy Flora followed in their father's footsteps as loggers from an early age. Former Farm Week host Troy Moling takes it from there.
Together since 1999, and we started when we were 6 years old, working in the woods.
With a beginning like that, one might say Jason and Jeremy Flora's career was planned out by the time they hit elementary school. They cut their teeth by cutting wood for their father, a logger himself. Their childhood was spent honing their skills, even skipping school to pitch in when one of their dad's workers didn't show.
We enjoyed it. We growed up doing it, and we was making a pretty good living doing it. We was in the teenage years. We would we'd go haul some pulpwood and make money, and all the kids thought, we was rich because we'd go haul a couple loads of pulpwood. We'd have $75 in our pocket, and back then, that was a lot of money.
When they decided to make a go of it on their own, their dad gave them some old equipment to help them get the business off the ground.
He kind of gave us that old skidder and old loader when we started, and we cut with a chainsaw. And in 1999, we bought I think it was an 88 model tree cutter. And that was the first tree cutter that we had. And that's what we learned to thin with and everything.
Soon after, their big break came.
Our first good job together. It was actually a track that a lot of people was trying to buy. It was a 55-acre track in a little community called Clarkston. And it had a lot of light poles on it. We cut it together, and done good on it, and that's where the track I think that really got us going is that track right there.
Little by little, their reputation grew. Business is good with as many as 3 supervised crews working different jobs. The Floras own 6 logging trucks and have contracts on 7 more.
They even bought their first new knuckle boom loader in 2005. The brothers specialize in thinning pine plantations. Jeremy negotiates with landowners and Jason takes the lead on the equipment side.
We work together in the woods, if somebody misses, I'll fill in or he'll fill in. So, it works good together having a partner, because if I need to take off and go fishing, I've got the ability that I can take off and go fishing. And if he needs to go to ball tournaments with his little girls, he can take off and go, and we've got somebody there to run the show. It takes both of us to run the size operation that we're running. I'd hate to know I come out here and had to run it by myself.
This well-oiled logging machine caused the Mississippi Forestry Association to take notice in the form of a nomination for Outstanding Logger of the Year. What was a nomination has now turned into a win.
Actually, the nomination came forth from one of our association board members who had personally had Flora to log their timber and were just completely satisfied with the job that they did.
That award is selected by our Timber Harvesting Committee, and the Timber Harvesting Committee is made up of members from across the state, folks that work for various forestry industry companies and other groups across the state. They're looking for a logger that has a good business sense and good business abilities. Safety record is really important for that committee when they select the Outstanding Logger of the Year.
In fact, since forming the company almost 20 years ago, there hasn't been a single workday loss accident. As impressive as that is, in order to take the crown for Outstanding Logger of the Year, the winner must also possess professionalism when it comes to dealing with people and the environment.
What sets the Flora Brothers apart is their honesty. Even if it's an 80-year-old lady or a 50-year-old guy who has the knowledge on forestry and know what to expect, the payment is the same. So they handle everything and they'll give them the paycheck by the end of the day.
That's kind of the theme that you hear over and over, is they treat people like you would want to be treated. They're very friendly, they're a part of their community, they support their local organizations, the civic organizations, the schools, the local businesses. They're just a very integral part of their communities. Everybody knows them, everybody likes them, and you just couldn't ask for better neighbors. That you'd like them as neighbors as well as loggers.
The interactions they have with the landowners is just fantastic. They're willing to look out for the landowners, and they have a good relationship with everyone they work with, which is a huge benefit for them and a huge benefit for the landowners they work with. To be the winner is just a huge plus for the company, for them personally as well. It shows just what they do for the industry and how well they take care of themselves and their workers and the landowners and just the natural resource that we have out here. You can look around here, and if you don't see any trees scratched up from the equipment. They take care of it.
Through it all, they've managed to make sure family stays at the forefront of the family business, even if a friendly sibling rivalry sometimes gets in the way.
It's still like that today. And if he talks about something he can do out here better than anybody running a knuckle boom or a tree cutter, we all laugh about it and just go on. And I tell him I'm better at it, but I don't tell him.
Well, we always pushed each other because, this one always wanted to be the top one. We got old enough to start running chainsaws. We'd fight to whoever could cut the wood up with the chainsaw. It's always a push for each other. He comes at me and says, "Oh, you ain't doing nothing." I said, "Yeah, I'm doing more than you think I did. You ain't answered my phone 50 times today."
Other members of the family are involved in Flora logging too. Their wives, Kimberly and Ashley, work together to make sure day-to-day operations run smoothly behind the scenes.
They're really smart, and they keep the business side of this thing going. My wife does all the stumpage work and pays the stumpage out, and when you go through 120, 130 loads a week, and you hauling on 3 different landowners, and you got 20 trucks hauling some weeks, and you know, it's a lot of paperwork goes into it, and then Jason's wife pays the bills on the bill side of it, and as much as equipment, trucks, and employees and stuff as we got, that's a lot of work going out in a week too.
There's even been talk of bringing in Jeremy's oldest son to help run the business one day. In the meantime, the Flora brothers will have no shortage of customers.
If you want them to cut your trees today, you better hurry up today and book them, because the wait time is 2 years. For them to get this award, it will help them market themselves even better. I guess now the waiting time will be 3 years.
Always fun to look back. And Troy Moeling, by the way, now works at the University of Nebraska. He's the host of an ag show there called Market Journal. Well, next week, an unusual story making the Mississippi River deeper. It's one of the most important rivers in the world, and now deeper water means bigger ships moving far more goods through it. Imagine being able to carry 500,000 more bushels of soybeans on one ship. And here's the kicker, it's good for the environment. A river deep, mountain high, that and much more next time on Farm Week. Remember, if you missed a story, look for past episodes of Farm Week on our website at farmweek.tv, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. We'll see you next week. Thanks for watching.